Remember, that feeling of waking up and seeing a presidential tweet storm directed at your country? Yeah, it was a pretty regular thing during Trump's first term. Feels like we're back in that unpredictable territory, but with a new twist this time. Now I've got Donald Trump and Elon Musk chiming in on UK politics.
It really is fascinating, and it goes beyond just celebrity noise. I mean, these are figures with a lot of influence. We're talking international relations, economic decisions. They can even potentially sway UK elections. It's real-world consequences coming from these online pronouncements.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't just some Twitter spat, It could actually have a ripple effect on people's lives. So let's dive into this Trump 2.0 situation. Is it the same song, different verse kind of thing? Or could it be something more this time around?
Well, to understand that, we need to look back at Trump's first term. He caused a lot of global uncertainty with his tweets, but a lot of times his bark was worse than his bite. Didn't always follow through.
He did love to stir the pot, though, like his criticism of the UK's North Sea oil tax, for instance. Classic Trump, the fossil fuel advocate, slamming the UK for pushing renewable energy. But is there something more to this? Could this be a sign of some deeper US-UK clash over energy policy?
Well, during his first term, Trump definitely put American energy independence first, even if it meant going against global climate goals. So if he were to return to office, that stance could definitely reignite tensions with the UK, especially as they're trying to be leaders in renewable energy.
And then you add Elon Musk to the mix. It's like he's gone from this tech innovator to a major political voice. And his approach, it just feels different from Trump's.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Trump's social media, it was often kind of scattered, impulsive. Musk's is very targeted. He goes after specific UK policies and individuals, uses that massive platform of his to amplify his criticisms.
Yeah, like his attacks on Keir Starmer. Musk has accused Starmer of not prosecuting child grooming gangs when he was director of public prosecutions. That's a really sensitive issue in the UK. Musk injecting himself into it just adds fuel to the fire.
It does. And it makes you wonder, does he understand the nuances of this issue in the UK?
Yeah.
The legal and social context. Because his pronouncements could actually further polarize public opinion and maybe even affect Starmer's political future.
So this puts the UK in a really tough spot. How do they respond to these powerful figures without making things worse or risking important relationships? It's a real balancing act.
For sure. Publicly criticizing Trump or Musk could have serious consequences, economically and politically. So how are different groups in the UK handling this?
Well, the Conservatives, they seem to be aligning with some of Musk's views cautiously, like they've launched an inquiry into grooming gangs, echoing his concerns, but they're also distancing themselves from his more extreme positions.
Yeah, like his support for Tommy Robinson, that far-right activist who was jailed for contempt of court. Even some conservatives pushed back against Musk calling for Robinson's release. They see the potential damage to the UK legal system.
And Labour, they seem to be treading very carefully. Probably worried about provoking Musk, especially given his potential influence on elections. There's that speculation that Musk might donate to Nigel Farage's Reform Party. That could really shake things up.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. I mean, Musk's wealth and reach give him a lot of power to influence things, particularly with certain groups. So Labour needs to figure out how to counter that potential influence without alienating people who are receptive to his message.
But this goes beyond the UK. Musk's Twitter tantrums, they've targeted leaders all over the world, called German Chancellor Olaf Scholz a fool, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier an anti-democratic tyrant, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau an insufferable tool. This isn't just about hurt feelings, though, right?
No, not at all. This kind of rhetoric, it causes diplomatic problems, undermines international cooperation. It makes it much harder to address shared global challenges like climate change or economic instability. When powerful people like Musk use their platforms to create discord, it can have a ripple effect on everything.
Yeah, it really shows how unprecedented this whole thing is. I mean, it's like social media, personality, and global politics all mixed together. It's uncharted territory. Who knows what the long-term consequences could be?
And it's not just the unpredictability. It's the speed, the reach of these platforms. Like in the past, these kinds of disagreements would have gone through official channels, but now a single tweet can go viral and cause an international incident in minutes.
And with Musk specifically, his tweets seem to have this amplifying effect. With that massive following he has, people treat his opinions like, well, gospel. I mean, it gives him a huge influence on the global conversation.
And he's built up this huge online following. His pronouncements carry a lot of weight, especially with certain demographics. And it really raises questions, right, about the accountability of these individuals. They have this influence, but they're not bound by the same constraints as, say, elected officials or diplomats.
It's like we're watching these unelected global influencers emerge, shaping public opinion, even affecting policy, but without any of the checks and balances that usually come with power. So, can anyone actually tame these Twitter titans? Can governments or international organizations actually regulate this new kind of social media diplomacy?
That's a tough one. Lots of complexities. Censorship is definitely not the answer. That would go against free speech, and it would probably backfire anyway, make them into martyrs.
And ignoring them doesn't seem like an option either. They have such huge platforms, it's like their words carry weight whether we acknowledge them or not.
Exactly. Their influence is there no matter what. So what are the alternatives? Well, some people suggest trying to reason with them, appealing to their sense of responsibility, urging them to think about the real-world consequences of what they say online.
There have been attempts at dialogue in the past, like Angela Merkel trying to engage with Trump on things like climate change and trade. But those efforts didn't really go anywhere. Trump mostly just dismissed her concerns.
True, but maybe Musk is different. I mean, he presents himself as this champion of innovation and problem solving, so maybe there's an opening for some kind of constructive engagement.
That's optimistic, but we have to remember that Musk often thrives on provocation. He likes to challenge the status quo, push boundaries, and sometimes that leads to reckless behavior.
Yeah, that's a good point. His unpredictability makes it hard to know how he'd respond to any attempts at dialogue. He might see it as weakness or an attempt to control him, and that could make him even more antagonistic.
So if reasoning with them doesn't work, what about a more confrontational approach? Like fighting fire with fire, using social media to counter their attacks and try to control the narrative.
It's tempting, but it's risky. Could easily escalate things into a full-blown social media war. And who knows what the consequences of that would be.
And let's be honest, governments aren't exactly known for their social media skills or their ability to create compelling narratives online. It's a whole different game than traditional diplomacy. They could end up looking out of touch. Or even worse, they could end up fueling the very sentiments they're trying to counter.
Exactly. Governments often struggle to keep up with online communication. It's fast-paced, nuanced. So yeah, getting into a social media battle with Musk or Trump, it could easily backfire.
Okay, so we've talked about ignoring them, reasoning with them, fighting fire with fire. None of those seem like great options. So is there any way to harness this power for good? Could these platforms, these individuals, be used to actually promote positive change in the world?
It's an interesting thought. Like, imagine if Musk used his platform to advocate for things like climate action or poverty reduction. I mean, he could potentially make a real difference on these issues.
The possibilities are there, but it would require a big shift in perspective. Right now, it seems like both Trump and Musk are mostly focused on their own agendas, their own grievances. They're using their platforms to divide rather than unite.
Yeah, you're right. It's important to remember these platforms are tools. Their impact depends on how they're used. There's definitely potential for positive change, but it would require a real effort to put the collective good above personal agendas.
And maybe that's where the rest of us come in. As citizens, journalists, influencers, we have a responsibility to hold these Twitter titans accountable, to challenge them to use their platforms for good.
Absolutely. We need to have critical dialogue, push back against misinformation, and demand more responsible behavior from people who have so much influence. It's not just about Trump and Musk. It's about how we, as a global community, navigate this new interconnected world.
This whole situation really reminds us that we're not just passive bystanders in this digital world. We have a role to play in shaping how these platforms are used and what impact they have on our world. Feels like we're all kind of watching this social media showdown play out, holding our breath, waiting for the next crazy twist. It's fascinating, but it's definitely nerve-wracking. The whole world's watching.
Yeah, it really raises some big questions, about power, about influence, about how we communicate globally in this century. It's like we're seeing a whole new way of doing diplomacy, and nobody's written the rule book yet.
Okay, so let's put the focus on you, the listener. Imagine you're a world leader dealing with this whole Trump-Musk situation. How do you handle it? Do you engage? Ignore them completely? Or is there some middle ground?
There's no easy answer. It depends on the situation, Weigh the risks and the rewards. If you engage directly, you might actually give them more attention, legitimize what they're saying. But if you just ignore them, it could look like weakness or like you don't care.
Yeah, It's a tough balance. You don't want to give them any more attention than they deserve, but you can't just let them spread misinformation and inflammatory stuff without pushing back.
And you have to think about the political situation at home. How will your own citizens react? Your voters? What if it looks like you're being bullied or manipulated by these guys on social media? Public perception is a big deal. You have to be careful not to create more division or instability.
It's a minefield, for sure, and the stakes are high. What works with Trump might not work with Musk, and vice versa. They have different motives, different tactics. It's hard to predict how they'll react.
Right. They're both really good at communication, but in very different ways. You have to understand their motivations, their styles, if you want to respond effectively.
So are we stuck in a world where international relations are just controlled by Twitter feuds? Is this the new normal for diplomacy?
I wouldn't say that for sure. We're still in the early stages of this whole social media thing. It's understandable to feel overwhelmed by it all. But I do think we can adapt. We can come up with strategies to deal with this new landscape.
Maybe this is just a phase, a period of adjustment while we figure out what it all means. Maybe this whole social media diplomacy thing will lose its appeal when people start to see the downsides.
It's possible. Or maybe we'll see new platforms pop up, ones that are designed specifically for diplomacy that encourage constructive dialogue instead of sensationalism and attacks.
Or maybe we'll all just get used to the drama, become numb to it, just accept it as background noise.
Yeah, that's not a great thought. But it does highlight how important it is to stay aware, to be active in shaping the role these platforms play in our lives. We can't just be passive consumers of information, taking everything at face value.
You're right. We have a choice in this. We choose how we engage with these platforms, how we consume information, how we hold those in power accountable.
Exactly. We can choose to focus on credible sources, have thoughtful discussions, and demand better from our leaders and from those who have influence. This isn't just about Trump and Musk. It's about how we as a global community navigate this new world.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to encourage you, the listener, to keep thinking about these questions. How do we balance free speech with responsible communication? How do we hold powerful people accountable in this digital age?
This has been a fascinating look at this ever-changing landscape. We hope you've gained a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities that are out there.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a different topic. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking those tough questions. Because the future of diplomacy, the future of our world really, depends on our ability to deal with these complex issues.